chair ತೆಗಿರಿ. ಅದು ಅವ್ರು ಬಂದಾಗ ಬೇರೆ ಸರ್ ಒಂದು ತಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿ. Guys, I need your attention, please. One third ಹೊಡೆದು. These are the aboriginal inhabitants of this land called Turunadu. We call them the Koragas. Most of the other communities which exist here, they're always migrated. They're the diaspora which have come in the last 1,000 years. They speak a unique dialect which is not part of the Panchadravida Bhasha or the five vernacular structures of the South Indian language ecosystem. The parent language which we all speak belong to the Tamil and the Sendamil, we call it, and the Sendamil and Kannada, they come from the same family, and they have a base and roots in Prakrit. These aboriginal dialects are something which doesn't belong to that family, and in India we have more the spoken language rather than the language with scripts. So this is one of those small pockets. ನಿಮ್ದು ಎಷ್ಟು ಹಾಡಿತ್ತು ಗಣೇಶನ? 4 ಹಾಡಿನಾ ಒಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ತುಳುನಾಡಲ್ಲಿ, ಒಟ್ಟು ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ದಕ್ಷಿಣ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ? There are a population of 11,000 people all put together, spread in 5 hamlets. ಐದು ಹಾಡಿಯಾ? ಅಲ್ಲ, ಒಂದೇ ರೀತಿ ಇದೆ. ಎಷ್ಟು ಹಾಡಿ ನಿಮ್ಮದು? ಎಷ್ಟು ವಿಧ ಇದೆ? The four types of the origins, and then they spread in the totaling to 11,000 people spread in 5 districts, from Kasaragod in Kerala to Kundapur in Karnataka. So we are going to hear, this is an ancient drum. They used to communicate with these drums before. And these drums were played at different time in the society when there's a death which is happening or a birth which is happening. So when people far away, when the world was much more silent without the vehicle and other noise pollution, the nearby villages, they used to hear this like the tom-toms of the Africans. So there's a death happening in that village. So that is the message was going. So we're just going to play a small ensemble of this, repertoire from this ensemble, and then they will explain how they use the mattus which they're going to tell me, and I'll translate it into English to you guys, okay? Suru Margan. So primarily, I'll just explain, it starts with the flute, and chende, hagle, chende barchen. That is chende. This is the primitive chende when it's used in Kathakali in Kerala and in Krishnatam and in the Yakshagana forms. This is one term, that is the dolu. And then that is called the tala, the cymbal. So this ensemble, they'll be playing their own repertoire. So first you just listen to us, go further. So one of the experiments which we worked collaborating with the visual artist Purushottam Adve and Nirmithi Kendra was this was in a very crude form. So how do we present it as a repertoire of as you've heard it, it's kind of a more minimalistic, music which goes in a one in a frequency of the guided by the rhythm. And then so later they try to explore their skills in faster tempos and slower tempos, how it was composed, so it becomes presentable in a situation. Otherwise these were outcast people, they were not even people who used to never even touch them in the context even till 20 years before. So we made them the experiment which Nirmithi Kendra and this group, and when we were working with them, was to assimilate their in the four different hamlets where they originate from, the four different dialects of their own language. So now Ganesh is working at teaching their children in school so that this dialect is not lost. So they're developing the curriculum in the academics. So there's this language which is now spoken only by 11,000 people will be lost in future. So they get imbibed into the Kannada or the Tulu mainstream culture. These are subculture, So in that experiment which we kind of worked on was to kind of systemize, not make it a very classical form. If you make it into a classical form, the form is lost. So trying to understand their aspiration and then how it could be presentable was what you just saw now. Otherwise, in the olden days, they used to play in a different tattoo, which we'll be explaining later in the other half of the show. Now we'll play how it was in the crude form, which was existing all these years. This has got a history of almost 2,000 years, where they were the original inhabitants of this land. ಹಳೆಯ ತಟ್ಟು ಹೇಗಿತ್ತು ಮತ್ತು ಪ್ರವೀಣ್ ಅವರು ಆ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆರಿಮೆಂಟನ್ನು ನಿಮ್ಮನ್ನು ಒಂದು ಹೇಗೆ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಅಂತ ಮಾಡಿದಲ್ಲ ಗಣೇಶರೇ, ಅದನ್ನು ಒಂಚೂರು ಈಗ ಹಳೆ ತಟ್ಟಿನ ಒಂದು ಮಟ್ಟ ಒಂದು 2 ನಿಮಿಷ ಮಾಡಿ ಅದು ಮಾಡಿ ನಿಲ್ಲಿಸಿ ಅದಾದ ಮೇಲಿಂದ ಇದು ಮಾಡಿ. ಏನು ಸುದರ್ಶನ್? Vinitha, are we ready for the presentation? Shall I break now? Do we break now and or we continue the music? I'm sorry? Yeah, yeah. You're installed, no? Ready. This is ready to go. So, ಈಗ ಒಂದು ಬ್ರೇಕ್ ಮಾಡೋಣ ಡಿ ಸಿ ಬರೋ ಮೇಲೆ ಶುರು ಮಾಡೋಣ ಗಣೇಶನ ಅವರ ಅಷ್ಟೊತ್ತಿಗೆ ಅವರು ಟೈಮ್ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟೇಷನ್ ಆಗ್ತಾರೆ. So we'll carry on with the next session and then we'll have them again after finishing the session. ಈ ಲೈಟ್ ಡಿಮ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಉಮೇಶರೇ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟೇಷನ್ ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್ ಕಾಣಡವ. ಬೈದಾರ ಅಂಚನೆ ಸೆಷನ್ ಮುಗಿದು ಡಿ ಸಿ ಬಜೆ ಕೊಡಿಸೋ ನೋಡ್ಕೋ.
Danya, I can hear you. She'll wait. Because she did.
தேகிறது யாரும் ரசிக்கவில்லையே. இந்த கைகள் மட்டும் உன்னை தீண்டும். தென்றல் போகின்றது, சோலை சிரிக்கின்றது, யாரும் சுகிக்கவில்லையே. இந்த கைகள் மட்டும் உன்னை தீண்டும். காற்று வீசும், வெயில் காயும் காயும், அதில் மாற்றம் ஏதும் இல்லையே. ஆவானும் மண்ணும் நம்மை வாழச் சொல்லும், அந்த வாழ்த்து ஓயவில்லை என்றென்றும். வானில் நிலா காய்கிறது, நேரம் தேய்கிறது, யாரும் ரசிக்கவில்லையே. சின்ன கைகள் மட்டும் உன்னை தீண்டும். இதோ போகின்றது ஆசை மேகம், மழையை கேட்டுக் கொள்ளுங்கள். அதோ கேட்கின்றது குயிலின் பாடல், மழையை கேட்டுக் கொள்ளுங்கள். இந்த பூமியே பூவனம், உங்கள் பூக்களை தேடுங்கள். இந்த வாழ்க்கையே சீதனம், உங்கள் தேவையை தேடுங்கள். நிலா காய்கிறது, நேரம் தேய்கிறது, யாரும் ரசிக்கவில்லையே. சின்ன கைகள் மட்டும் உன்னை தீண்டும்.
Thank you. Did you guys figure it out or should I go one more?
I think we'll take one, like 5 more minutes.
मेरो दिनाति मिलाए मखाया मयाति में हतारी दे बतासी दे. हो 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 तिम्रो र मेरो हाम्रो कथाको शीर्षक धैर्य भनिसकेछ. तिमीलाई नदेखि तिम्रो अनुहार आँखामा मेरो बसिसकेछ माया.
Thank you. All right. Off to you.
Thank you so much, Dhanya. I think we are done. We are just loading things up, and we'll be running in a minute.
but let it be an inspirational, like a movie watching session, like the setting sort of adds towards. So we're going to have 4 presentations. The first one will be from Roshni. I'm going to use first names because all of us know each other right now. She's a Mumbai-based brand strategist, and her presentation is going to talk about citizen participation in hyperlocal branding. We have Guillermo from Placemaking Mexico and Daniel and Gan of Placemaking Malaysia, who are going to cover consonants and congruences in placemaking in the global south. We finally have Dirk, the former deputy mayor of Amsterdam, where he will be sharing the success story from his constituency on NDSM. That's when the bottom up meets the top down. I would like us to get right into it. I'm Sobia, by the way. I'm a co-founder of Sensing Local and been given the responsibility of also being now a regional representative, which is why I'm like, we've got to find some answers for our journey ahead. So please, Roshni, you can give it a start.
Everyone well up with the spirits. I know we've had great music tonight. We've had the most amazing talent here. So here we are back to kind of set the last sort of a round of thoughts and new sort of perspectives on what we're trying to do here in placemaking. So thank you for turning up and having your chai and coming back. I'm Roshni. Sorry, can I unplug this? Is that okay? Sorry, I just want to move around a little bit. Can you guys see me okay? Yeah, because I feel like I'm getting hidden behind this. Okay, perfect. Sorry? Yeah, exactly. Sorry. Okay, awesome.
Hi. Okay, you can still hear me, right? Awesome. Okay, so guys, I am Roshni Desai. I come from Bombay and I run this design studio called Local. We all say design freely, but we run a graphic design brand strategy and design studio. And the reason I'm here and the reason this studio is different is because we really want to make a difference on the planet. So we are very, very mindful of the kind of projects we pick. While there is, as you know, brand strategy and design is a massive buzzword these days, but we try to find projects that are rooted in the local and affecting global. And every project that has had global change has always, had its roots in local culture. And we are, I'm massively proud of this room and privileged to be here talking with you guys, because each of you here is, has been, you guys are amazing rock stars. Every single person I've spoken to this evening has inspired me. And, it's like everybody's doing this path-breaking work and really, really brings a lot of hope and refreshed energy to my practice as well. So we're a team of, we'll come back to that. So what we believe is form and function is design. Of course, everyone knows that. We all study, those who studied architecture know that as a definition of design. Form is when something, should look like it's doing its job, and then function is the function it needs to do, and then that's what causes good design, right? So, for example, this mic, the form is there, it's doing its job, and that's good enough. But what we found, and of course, again, in the world of architecture, you do know culture is the secret sauce, but in branding and graphic design, that has never been sort of looked at that way, especially in the Indian context. So, So we've had a good run since we've started. I founded this 5 years ago with this sort of, it was almost like a hypothesis that can we focus on projects that want to do cultural and social good. And so a little bit of my journey, I've been in industry for 15 years. I started my career at MTV and then worked at Saffron Brand Consultants and Landor Associates. And it's really interesting because I threw these names out to some of you guys, and a lot of, especially Saffron does a lot of place branding, and not many had heard of that. Actually, no one I spoke to had heard of it, which makes us realize there's a disconnect between the world of branding and the world of urban development and architecture. And there shouldn't be, because we both need each other to coexist, and which is why so many place branding projects seem like a nice add-on, but not really a deep dive. Anyway, long story short, have had a really, really great run, been mentored by some really great people, studied in Bombay, and then moved to London, and then come back. Yeah. Sorry, this is a little glitchy. Anyway, moving forward. So local, the way we've structured it is there's the studio, the lab, and the community. And we kind of create projects that, create self-initiated projects at the lab that sort of feed into a repository of graphic design for India. And I'll explain what that means, which again informs work we do for the studio and for clients. So the studio, as everybody must realize, that the studio pays for the lab right now, and that's how we sort of self-fund it. So the lab has, and the lab and local as a studio, we have sort of 6 missions. We really took our lab as a cult really seriously. So this idea of researching and studying local, the idea of experimenting and pushing. Remember guys, this is in the context of graphic design. Not architecture, not fashion, but graphic design, right? Because that's a whole realm that has not been touched and studied in India. So making important information visible. So because again, graphic design has, information design such a big part of graphic design. Solving real world problems, how does communication and semiotics work in real world issues? Archiving and guiding. Graphics have been just they've developed in India over time, and it's never really been studied or archived. And then, of course, the idea of leading by example. So what brings me great joy is when other designers, students, and other disciplines sort of want to do the same. I think we've set a good sort of North Star to saying, hey, you know what? You can pick projects that are pushing India forward, and only work in a certain sector and try to inject that into your practice. And I'll bring that, I'll tell you how. So some of the projects we're working on with the lab is the Indian Graphic Design Story, which is a textbook on Indian graphic design. Do you realize when we all studied in design colleges in India, we studied Bauhaus methodologies of graphic design, and that it cannot be further enough from graphic design that is in India, right? So it doesn't apply to us, and when we step out on our streets, we don't see Bauhaus, we don't see grid systems, we don't see the order that is taught to us, and that creates this dissonance. And then you're also, the way color, the way semiotics, the way shapes, things are represented and interpreted in India are so different. So we've actually tried to break it down, and I would love for you guys to check it out. It's on Instagram right now, where what we do is we upload, and we've created a crowdsourced project. So we upload a topic every, say in week 1. We wait for our community to send us information from all over India, and then it becomes a series. So it's a series of trivia and different sort of taxonomic and sequential plans, and how the different variants of a certain thing exists in India, and a small podcast in the end which interviews local people who are actually creating those graphics. So not just asking graphic designers, because it becomes an echo chamber. So when we talk to about the Indian Xerox story, we would ask the guys who actually create those Xerox flyers. When we've done the Bindi Tikka story, we've asked the Bindi sellers of which shapes sell the most, and what do they indicate, and what the colors work, and things like that. So it's very important for us. This project will open sort of more conversation, because also this has not been done before. There's a whole idea of, it's so much work. But I guess if you make it fun and you make it into an Instagram project, it can be done, right? we're in season 2 of this now. So we've done this last year. Now we're doing it this year as well. There are a bunch of other projects, but I'm going to rush a little bit. So brand design. I want you guys to look at this screen, just like take it in, because a lot of people think brand design is just, okay, you finish your entire urban design project and say, okay, we need a brand design company to just do a logo for us or do a signage system and come and do some brochures and brand it. But it's not just that, right? It is, brand design is as much problem solving as any other design discipline. And I want you guys to think of how we can be applied, right? So what is the problem? If brand design is problem solving, what is the problem we're solving? So one is, of course, the idea of, this is again, I've kept these problems in this context of placemaking. But say, for example, when you go to, go to any place, right? You go to Mysore, there's Mysore Park, there's Mangalore tiles, the Nasik oranges, the Kerala parothas, the Tanjore paintings. Every single part of the world, not just India, every city, every place it has something it's remembered by. But in a massively globalizing culture world, it's all available everywhere. So how does one, how do you, when you actually go there, right now in Mangalore, how do you celebrate tiles? How do you know that this is the heartland of it? How does a place tell you that without diluting its originality, right? Second problem I want to sort of bring to your notice. So a lot of international brands, right? They're designed, and I've been on the other side, so I know exactly what happens. They're literally these mock-ups that are given to us, which are streets in London, New York, etc. And we apply our design, brand design on it, and that's it. And then what happens is when reality is hit and these brands are executed across the world, as you can see, across different geographies, the same problem happens, that this logo, this brand sort of becomes this alien eyesore in the middle of some very, very different context, right? Yes, this is a graphic design problem. And what happens then, as you keep compounding something like this, is you create pollution. And then no matter what lovely architecture is there behind it, and kind of spaces are there around it, it all gets lost in this mayhem, right? And you could see, you can't even almost tell which areas these are, because, and we all know the problem with hoardings and things like that, but hoardings is one part of it, but the graphic design on it is actually the biggest part of it, right? You can probably not, there's commerce, and then there's the people who are sort of working behind it. So there is a responsibility for graphics to think about these things. Another problem to this is the idea of cognitive load of designing in silos. We spoke about, designing in silos and different departments doing things, but simple things like signage systems not being standardized in India, right? And while it's very enduring, they are hand painted, their local language is lovely. But what happens, so one is signage systems, there even buses, where the bus numbers are written and how it's written, which language is written across different cities is very different. And when you do these things, it creates this cognitive load. It's an extra thing to do when you go to a bus stop, you have to find out. There's certain bus stops I've heard, you don't even have the numbers on the hoarding, you have to go to this ticket counter and find out, right? So we've done this project with NID when I was teaching them cultural branding. And it was really fun because we did this during COVID, and they all had to go to their respective cities and take pictures of their bus stands and come back and report and see, and there was always this backlash like, oh, but this is so authentic and it's so beautiful. Yes, it is, but is it solving a design problem? Or is it creating more load for a commuter who's to catch a train or catch a bus, and he's busy looking, okay, where is this information? Can I read it? Is it legible, etc., right? So these are sort of small, like a few problems that have pointed out. Now, what is the solution? So, so you guys now realize brand design is designing systems, right? We are designing, if you kind of think of brand as a way to systemize something, look at it from that lens and sort of look at, that's how we see it. And then what else we see is the idea of inside out and outside in, right? So place branding is one way to solve it, where you are saying, okay, let the city of Udupi or the city of Manipal have a brand, and we will tell you how to feel about us, right? That's one way of doing it. The second way of doing it is creating brands with a sense of culture which exists around ODP. So if you go outside and you see the signages of all the restaurants, we just walked to the next place, and all the signs of the restaurants out there, the signages of all the stores around us. If that could reflect back and give you a sense of local culture, that could also be one way to solve it, right? So we at Local, we have a local method. We have a team of design researchers, multiple writers, graphic designers, typojournalists, and we sort of all want this mission, and this community is growing, and it's a privilege to be part of it. Over the years, a lot of work has happened, and I'm going to present a bunch of, I'm going to present 3 case studies to you. Each is a slightly different example of how this can be tackled. What I really want from this group is to think of how this applies for your particular practice, right? Was there a place in your career or any of the projects that you were working on where this could have been something to consider? So the first project is a signage system we did for the Warangal POXO court. And this was a really beautiful project. Vishala, who couldn't be here, she was the one who brought us on. And so the brief was, this is a POXO court. For all those who don't know what POXO is, it's protection of child from sexual offenses court. So you can imagine these little children, and it's also a family court. So little children and families who are probably in the worst time of their lives, and they're going to spend probably a couple of weeks or a month coming to this space and feeling intimidated. Already you're under stress. You're probably not in a good situation. So the brief was, okay, they were building this complex, and they said, how do we use signage to create a sense of calm and welcome in a space, right? How do we counter it? And while it's ironic, like it's not that easy. It's such a sensitive topic. You're in a court. How do you make sure you're not patronizing it, but at the same time you're kind of calming somebody down, making them feel more intimidated? So one of the briefs I gave my team was saying, if you go to an amusement park, if you go to Disneyland, right, and you see the science system there, that's the first thing that will get you excited and tell you how to feel about that space, right? You see, Mickey Mouse Land, or the castle is there, and you suddenly know where you are and how you're supposed to feel. So that was the sort of back thinking. And then so we also said, okay, what are some of the elements that will help? Okay, this is supposed to animate, but what are some of the elements that will help this, right? So we looked at Cheryal paintings, and we said, that's how moral stories were told, right? How do you take something that is not intimidating as a design style to the local, to the local people, and kind of use their language to tell their story. So we introduced Nana, Amma, and Chinni was the young girl from the science system that would guide you around the court and make you feel a little bit better than what you felt like. So these are actual photographs of how it was executed, and little things. We created a whole system about how this would be communicated, and little areas could be designated, and how this the verbal and color language of what they were already familiar with could be used. Of course, it was bilingual, that and a little bit of sensitivity was sort of injected into the space. The next project, so I want you to think about, so this project is very much in your space. It's signage systems for an architecture project. Fair enough. That's one way of looking at it. Second is this idea of on a very macro level, right? Sorry, on a very micro level. So this was a project that I had done many years ago, and when there was a whole conversation about safety of women in the public space. And I had been commissioned, this was way before I started Local, I'd been commissioned to design a taxi to give a message, right? And the message was about the safety of women in public space. And I said, how do you make people actually listen without being preachy, right? So one way to do it, again, sorry, this was supposed to animate, but one way to do it was this taking something that, again, what they already know, taking from the local and kind of having a spin on it. So we took so for those who don't know, this is the ladies' compartment in Mumbai, local trains. And the reason we have ladies compartment in the first place is because of this scare of safety of women in the public space, right? So, and we took that lady and converted it into a man, and we basically created 9 rules of what happens when women have to travel in public spaces, right? Like ridiculous rules, right? Like, you know, keep your bag in front of you while traveling, or don't show your cleavage or neck. So don't, you know, cover your shoulders. Don't talk too loudly. Don't sit in the front seat. Don't travel too late at night. And when you just changed, and in the middle it says, "Kya purusho par ye niyam lagu hai," which is, does this apply to men as well? And when you see things like that, there were people in the taxi. So when we applied this to the taxi, and the taxi driver, this is the photo shoot we did, but the taxi driver, he's driven around and given me amazing stories about, you know, the conversation it struck, and saying, "Oh yeah, that looks ridiculous." Just to see that same conversation in a human, from a perspective of someone else looking at it, going on a daily journey, and you just look up and you see this subversion of gender, right? And I think this also came from the hypothesis that men don't really realize that how it is for us, you know? Like, oh, why are you scared? Why are you putting your bag in front of you? But the minute you see it apply to you, you realize the intensity of that emotion. And it really started to create a lot of questions and provoke a lot of conversations. It was really fun because, you know, we kind of made a lot of got a lot of different groups of men to have conversations around this. And this was also presented at TEDx Gateway and things like that. So there was like a whole thing. BBC did a piece on this. So it was really amazing to see that something so simple, it's a graphic design project. It's just you could use the idea of semiotics and making people question with such simple tools, but applied to the right placemaking, right? And the third is a more clear branding project. This was done during my time at Saffron Brand Consultants. And I think this was a very pivotal project for my career because it set the path to what I wanted to do as a designer. We got the privilege to design the brand for the state of West Bengal. This is right before the Communist Party was then told to leave, but it was, at that time, it was the longest running democratically elected communist government in the world. And they were sort of losing traction in this new world where people were not believing that they cared about their people or cared about economy and things like that. So they said, okay, we need to do a rebrand. So when we were commissioned, we traveled across the entire state, and literally we've spoken to farmers and teachers and local bureaucrats and communicators, and it was just the most amazing project. And if you see this idea of translating directly, right? So if you see these little girls that we shot, and a lot of other people actually made their way into our brand. So the brand was called Shobha Bangla, which means everyone's Bengal. And it was not even, also it's not a tourist, it's not a brand for just tourism. It was meant to be a brand across the industries, right? Technology, discussion, social work, cottage industry, tourism, all of it. So we created a sort of architecture system that would work across all of these different sectors, and still the Ang of the Bangla became the sort of icon. And it was just a beautiful project. The whole project was presented as, presented as a brand guideline in a newspaper because, you know, that's the best way to disseminate their brand across the state. And yeah, huge win for us. So again, this is at the top, like I would say macro level, right? Thinking of graphic design at that level branding. This next slide I have added in only because I realized that there is this missing link. And a lot of people do work in the public space, and I did pick those in the beginning. But today, after I came here, I realized, you know what? There is a responsibility of the private sector as well, right? So this brand is basically a luxury health spa, private sector. It was the brief that came to us. There's, hey, you know, this really prominent person with a lot of connections has this piece of land in Alibag, which is an island outside of Bombay, and they are creating this. Again, a celebrity architect and designer was creating the space. The concept was Balinese villas meets California chic, and come on, please brand this for us. And so we said, because we are local, I said, hang on a second. I said, hang on a second. You guys are sitting in Alibag. Alibag has had a Ben Israeli Jewish population, and hence they spoke Hebrew, they speak Konkani, they speak Marathi, they speak English, Hindi, and yet you want to talk about Balinese villas in California. There's inspiration in your backyard, right? The reason I want to talk to you about this is it's actually not that hard to convince the private sector, right? While there is a struggle with the public sector, so they said, okay, let's give it a shot. I said, you want an international looking brand? We'll make it. But let me draw from India. So there is always this disconnect that when we design with Indian graphics, it means Horn OK Please and kitsch and truck art. And what we've tried to sort of make people understand is that's not it. It's just because design principles were applied differently. You can make a sophisticated brand with using our elements, right? So this is going to give you a little bit of insight on how we work. So we do workshops and interviews. Then we do something called local walk. So we go around said location, take a lot of pictures, get inspired, and sort of go with the brief in mind. And then from that comes out our brand. So of course the brand colors and the graphics are literally from what we pull. So we created a modular graphic system where we gave them a library of elements that they could combine and create infinite combinations and a brand that could keep refreshing itself. But as you can see, there is a mix. So there's a mix of local elements and one luxury element because it is a luxury spa after all, spa resort after all. Same thing with the icon set. We took the local Varli art. This is actually outside in the school, right outside the location, and we just took different elements of Varli paintings. And it's so interesting because Varli art is seen as such a hand-drawn, doodly element, and you can create a beautiful, sophisticated icon set out of it, which is unique to them, which nobody else can own. And here's a brand that is truly, truly them. And even with the photography style, we really pushed and said we don't want these pristine shots only in the villa. We want to go out into the space, let them actually cycle outside the actual wadis, be on the beach where they are actually going to be, shoot the local machiwalis and the spaces, and have that coexistence, because a lot of luxury brands are just living in these little glass towers and don't interact with the real world, which honestly is the real luxury. You get a beach, you get to be in local communities. I mean, you get this quiet, beautiful, old heritages. That's true luxury. And we're trying to, with each of, especially with our luxury projects, we are trying to redefine what luxury means with each going on, because people are running out of what luxury means. That whole Butler and New York, and that's sort of going on for a while. So this brings me to the last bit of my presentation, and I can be really precise here. But these are, so what does this mean when you say citizen participation and hyper-local branding? So I think this idea of citizen participation works on both micro and macro levels. When Vinita gave me this topic, I was wondering, how does citizen participation is not just one, it's not down to up, it's up to down as well, right? And we are all citizens, whether you're from a private sector or public, everybody has a responsibility to play here. So in the macro, I would say a brand is systemic. Should I pause? Sorry. So on a macro level, I would say, now that you can see, a brand is a systemic change, right? So when New York, for example, this was run by Wolf Follins, again, New York City had this branding done. They created this about 10 years ago, and it's still, their website still has this logo. So what happens is when you solve for one, you're not repeating the problem again. You're building systems, you saves money, saves time, you solved it, and hopefully you future-proof it, right? And it's something then it goes on, and over time it actually builds the brand. So every time you see a taxi now in New York, it will keep reminding you. The longer it runs, actually it benefits the brand. Second is, of course, consistency, believability. So for example, I want to make you imagine, like if you hear about Tanjore paintings, Tanjore is known for paintings, right? Then you go to Tanjore and there is a clear signage system, like my first project, for example, done in the Tanjore style. When you go around the sort of street signages, talk about it. And then you also hear about events and placemaking and marketing activities that resonate this idea of pride in Tanjore. And then and if you want to bring a full circle, you also have, and help the local economy. You have stores where you can buy Tanjore paintings or magnets and merch and all that. But that really, of course, no other city loves, gold standard is London. They can brand anything. They brand even the covers that are there in their in their tube seats. So it's really interesting. You can literally buy everything from their public space. Coming to micro, so local businesses and privately owned spaces also have a responsibility. Like we were talking about Avas, right? If Avas is, if we'd gone the Balinese way, then it would not be adding to the local culture. Now Avas is part of pushing Alibag's local sort of heritage. Everything they will do now, activities, and latest I've realized that they actually sponsored a school next to them, because it's sort of now they're coming out of their space and actually interacting with the world they live in. What's happening with brands these days is everybody just wants to be in their space, right? The next is this idea of course, people are the best brand ambassadors. How do we activate them? Can we train them? Can they, like from the taxi driver who takes you from the airport to every shopkeeper, to the children that you meet, can they tell you the same story that you want to tell as a brand? And of course, different places demand different identities. I think this idea of just replicating something that works in a certain country, it's okay. I also heart Mumbai, that's fine. But it's not really the emotion that I feel for Mumbai. When you ask what you feel for Mumbai, it's like Bombay is an emotion. Or you'll say Amchi Mumbai or Mumbaikar. That's me Mumbaikar. That's really what you're trying to capture. I heart Mumbai is not something we say. It's not the language we speak. It's not the tonality. It's not the brand tone. When you can I heart NY, but you can't I heart Mumbai. Nobody says that, right? So can you really go bottom up? Ask people to contribute. Do a workshop. Ask them what is it that from a tone of voice standpoint that it sounds like. What does the city sound like? Even with the graffiti that we are having across, there's a lot of graffiti culture now, but most of it don't connect back from the way it's designed. It looks very foreign. The colors that are used, the styles that are used, the semiotics of it. And then telling our truth authentically, right? So what is the most authentic way of graphic designing, right? You don't have to borrow and copy. You just look at what's out there, right? When you do Red Fort, this is literally how the gardens look, and they've actually applied that. And last but not the least, everything is visual communication, guys, right? Even the things that you don't plan. Every piece of graphic design evokes emotion, whether it's irritation, it's confusion, or it's amazement, but different. It is happening anyway. So why not control it? Why not give it a narrative right from the start? I think that's it. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Roshni, what is it that you would like Placemaking India to take forward? I know the graphic design, just collaborating with graphic designers, we ourselves face that in our practice as well. But to start that conversation as well, how do we start bringing that in from the beginning, not as an afterthought, but please tell us, what is your...
I think that's exactly it. It bring us to the table right in the beginning, like any designer, right? You always say, don't bring us as an afterthought. We want to sit at the table right at the start. We will help you conceptualize it as well. Because ultimately, graphic design and brand is communication design. It's not art, right? It is going to help push the narrative along. So it has to be embedded in every part of your every decision on even a execution level. Yeah. I think that's what I would say. Thank you.
No questions, sorry. Okay, the reason I'm saying no questions, we know where we are on time. We've got 3 more presentations to go. And what I would suggest is, like I said, let it be reflections. We can catch everyone for questions, absolutely, but for now, let it be reflections. I'd also like to welcome Udupi's District Commissioner, Shri Kumara Rao. Thank you for joining us. Kurma Rao, sorry, Kurma Rao. We'll sort of move on, sir. We've got a few more presentations that are in there. Would love for you to join us and sit through those. Next, I'd like to welcome our guests from Think City. So we have Daniel and Gan from Placemaking Malaysia. Yeah, you guys. Okay, sorry. Am I skipping the order?
Good evening, everyone. Obviously, thank you for the introduction. I'm going to keep it short. There's not going to be a presentation slide by slide. We'll play a video about what is Think City. I'll do a real quick 3 minutes introduction about what it is. We are here for the next few days. We can talk more about it. So,
You have music in your video?
yeah, we do. Essential. Or maybe I'll do it the other way around. I'll talk about Think City then. All right, so Think City is an impact organization. We started in Georgetown in 2009 when it was enlisted as a UNESCO site. We are an impact organization, but fully owned subsidiary of the Sovereign Fund of Malaysian government. That said, it operates independently, so we're not government, but we operate like an NGO, but we are not NGO. That enables us to work within the sweet spot between government, community, private sector, and also agencies, etc. And with that, we have actually ran program since 2009 in Georgetown, other cities in Malaysia, KL, Johor Bahru, etc., and also in the region. So we have done projects out of Malaysia as well. So what do we do that's different, right? I think just to sum it up, 4 processes that we always take, and I think a lot of it was discussed today, I won't go in detail, is basically discovery, design, demonstrate, and disseminate. So how we do is discovery. I think you were just talking about brand, understanding, localizing, etc. So whenever we go to a new city, we talk about understanding. So the local context. We work with local community. We work with local authorities, etc. We do a evidence-based approach. I think this morning there was a presentation about some form of culture mapping, GIS, etc. So we do all the baseline study, culture mapping, and also stakeholder engagement to really understand the space. But what we really want to know is what exactly we are responding to. Then only we design together with the community, what is that response, what exactly we are responding to. And once we do that, oftentimes it's not 100% successful. That's why we need to demonstrate. And if you're all familiar with placemaking, this is what we call pop-ups, demonstrative project, whatsoever, but it's actually experimenting, testing out the solution if it works. And then if it doesn't, we go back to the drawing board and you go through the iterative process. And at the end of it, once it's proven successful, then only we disseminate, which is we scale up, etc. My colleague Gan will explain more about how it was applied in one live project. But with that, I think I've introduced Think City. We are here for the next few days. Feel free to come have a chat with us to understand more how it works. Yeah, so we'll play a video on that and we'll continue on this.
Think City is essentially a platform for collaboration, a community-led urban regeneration program that brings the various stakeholders to align in a shared vision that we can make our cities work together.
They started off with giving grants for refurbishment of buildings and content providing, both in Georgetown Festival and Batu Fringe Festival. I think placemaking is changed people to take pride of the place that they live in. It helped change the physical look and fabric of the inner city, and with that also the appreciation of culture and the freedom of the arts.
Makam ni jadi center di mana komuniti kami ni berjumpa. Masa tu bangunan berada dalam keadaan sangat teruk lah korang kata. Jadi ini betul-betul komuniti punya projek dan Think City buat bantuan dari segi teknikal dan sebagainya.
The reality today is that the future lies with cities. Cities have become the pathways for prosperity and progress.
This transformation in especially Georgetown is very big. To an extent, I think it was called as ghost town. Now you can see that the people are coming back and the open spaces, people are using it, plus art and culture, and also the tourists coming back. That all this transformation really giving the economic growth to the city.
A lot of things happen somewhere else, but not in the middle of the city. So this is what we are providing, just a physical space for people to work, to collaborate.
Bila ada Zhongshan sekarang ni, dah semakin ramai orang datang balik ke pusat bandar. Bila kita pindah sini, banyak benda yang berubah. Kita dapat lagi banyak customer, cash flow lagi laju. So, dia bagi motivation untuk kita untuk expand lagi kedai ni. Building ni dia creative hub. Everybody is doing something different and everybody is supporting each other.
You don't work alone. Together, you can make things happen.
Step up, take charge, have a sense of ownership. Everyone out there have the power in their hands to make their cities better.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having us today and actually this week. My name is Ganiran, you can call me Gan. Just a little bit a background introduction about myself. I think similar to some of you here, I'm not an architect, I'm not urban planner, I'm not a designer, I'm an electronic engineer who studied in UTM in Malaysia, and this is actually my first job started since 2017. It has been a 5-year journey for me as a placemaker in Malaysia, and now I'm very excited to meet all of you here in India. This is my first trip as well in India, so it's exciting. And if I may just quickly share one project. I think the font is slightly different. It has been localized from what I expected. But basically, what I want to share here is about Kuala Lumpur Creative and Culture District. So from the video just now that you guys have seen, Malaysia has a multicultural community. I think similar to India. There is a lot of different culture, language has been used. So this has shaped different behavior. But in KLCC, what I'm trying to do here is, while we are making cities more livable, how we actually use creative and cultural as an tool to unite everyone together and actually to make cities more livable together. So these are the 6 strategies that we are trying to implant here. First, using culture, enhancing the ecosystem of the creative and culture ecosystem, and then improve the state of conservation of the heritage building, and also improve the public realm, accessibility, repopulating the city center, because when the rapid development happened in the historical Kuala Lumpur, everybody start moving out, that the demand of more space to live, which makes the cities, the heritage core less livable in a way. So we are trying to, through interventions with public realm improvement of accessibility, so making it more sexy again for people to live back into the historical core area. And with that, I think place management is very important. A governance framework has to be there. So these are the 6 strategies. But the program that I want to share here is not only one of the other. So for example, laneway improvement program. So we start small in a less contested space where it's easier for us to start a movement. So we started back in back lane. So if we thought of back lane is in Malaysia, people thought, okay, this is place where people throw rubbish, this is dirty, this is dark, this is unsafe, we don't want to go there. So we, through this public realm improvement program, we changed the perception of the people on the back lane, but adopting a participatory design process, being similar to all of us here who are practicing placemaking. And then this is how it looks before And through negotiation and engagement with the community, we have managed to clear out the laneway, making it accessible through a demonstrative project and subsequently fully implementation. And next. So after the completion of the bike lane improvement program, so these are some of the activation they would try to do to keep the street alive, and not just a one-off activation, but to create that sense of ownership. For example, using art as a tool to have public screening in the back lane to let people reimagine how we can use laneway as an event space, for example. And also incorporate with public light art. So at night, it might be quite dark. So how do we introduce public light art installation over here? So people can attract people back to the laneway, and then through this kind of civic surveillance, making it safer again. And next one, this is a green transformation program. So these are some of the example that we did. But what I want to highlight here is also using greening as a tool to create that sense of ownership. So the people who are using the bike lane can have a connection to the public space. So they will also help to take care of the space as well. And next, just now we have a tour to the heritage, the historical village. So tangible heritage is also very important because it's evidence of our past. So how do we actually celebrate our heritage? By preserving it, celebrate it, and then so that the future generation can also understand and enjoy it. But of course, this doesn't end with the conservation work, but again, using seasonal curated public art installation to draw the community back to the city. And this is one of the another example. Like, is it really worth upgrading the old building in Kuala Lumpur? So these two project has been featured in the press, where the owner actually retrofit, preserve it, and then activate it by gathering all the local creative entrepreneurs. So it's a bit hard to see here, but basically, the program is actually funded by the Ministry of Finance in Kuala Lumpur, in Malaysia. And then these are some of the components that we're looking at in terms of the impact. So we have the dark blue column at the direct impact, and then we have indirect impact. But what I want to emphasize here is the impact. You shouldn't just looking at where the fund benefiting which party, but actually how it can create a spillover value. So not only the private sector can capture it, but in terms of the public sector, in terms of the government, how they can actually capture the public investment after a value capture loop. So yeah, so this is just an estimation of economic benefit of this Kuala Lumpur Creative and Culture District, and I think it's very important for us to measure impact in terms of the economic sector as well. So I think with that, I'll end my sharing. I hope you enjoy, and thank you so much.
So what would be the one thing we should take away for Placemaking India?
Yeah, I think if I may share, there's a lot of case study out there. I think today we have seen a lot of case study, but one thing that really important to replicate is not the end product, but it's the process that make it different. So in different country, there are different local contexts. That how are we going to localize the process and make it work? Yeah.
Okay, that's nice. Thank you. Next, we have Guillermo from Placemaking Mexico. Are you still around? I don't see him. Come on. The mic, yeah. He's the Mexican who looks like an Indian, clearly.
So I'm going to speak about some flowers. Tulips. Yeah. Okay, so I saw all week like some people been struggling with my name, so yeah, especially this guy here. But like here I wrote it for you, so you can. Yeah, exactly. Good, perfect. Yeah. So my name is Guillermo Bernal. Um, so I come from Mexico. So I kind of see a lot of similarities between India and Mexico. It's fascinating. Some people, I mean, I met, they look pretty much Mexican, to be honest, and some of the flavors of food, some of the culture, some of how things are taken sometimes. So and I understand this about also of Mexico, but I think also relates a lot to India, is that I don't want to come here and tell you how to do things. I don't want to tell you how things are should be done, or what's my take on things, on what you should do in my perspective. But I'm going to tell you why I do things and why placemaking to me it's important, and it relates to my life, and it relates to the work we've been doing. What? Okay. Well, some of the pictures will have pictures, so it's okay. So, so what I think is I follow these three lodestars of my work in Mexico. So I think about short term, I think about low cost, and I think about high impact. Okay. So short term. So these are some. This is our planning for we built. We are finishing now 30 small places for early childhood, and this came from a private foundation, a huge foundation in Mexico that paid a lot of money to Bernard Bandier to do some beautiful, amazing books, manuals, guidelines to implement projects in Mexico. And they gave them to us and told them, okay, so we spent $1 million already into trying to build stuff, but we haven't built anything. So what I told them is, okay, so let's just plan it with the community, just do some so fast, short drawings that everyone can relate, not only architects. Everyone can see this drawing and say, of course, I want that. Yes, I understand an urban garden. I understand a safe pedestrian crossing. I understand a little park made with wood, right? So I'm going to show you our first. Unfortunately, you cannot see all of them, but these are some of the results. And it's okay. Don't worry. It took us 4 weeks to build these things because it's so fast. We don't need necessarily any And if we need some for the permit, then we do it later. But it's we have realized that it's so easy to if for administration just to send them whatever and then they will approve it and it's okay. It doesn't matter. But what it matters is if it's for early childhood. I was telling these guys, and if it's for early childhood, you need to do it fast because kids grow as fast as you can imagine. So if you're planning for other than 6 and then you take 2 years, 3 years for planning to do the project, then they are not early childs anymore, right? But of course, a lot of a process, and it's important. The process is important not only to do something and show it and like in the drawing, but actually go to the community, go to the parents, the teachers, the kids, and build it with them. So what's very simple was 1 day of planning with the community. So we were 1 full day with them, building their ideas. This is actually the last one we built in Chiapas. Chiapas, it relates a lot to this weather. It's very similar. $5,000 US to build this. Yeah. So it's basically they love the Jaguar, so they say, okay, we have a huge school, but they have not really a patio. They have different small areas. So they came with the idea of doing a Jaguar, making a mural that will connect all the areas. We did a garden. We did a playground, some wheels for them to play around. You can show in my social media how this goes. Or another one, like in a small indigenous town close to Mexico City. So it's basically bringing some games and some playgrounds, very simple, very cheap, and just making these kids never had a swing in their life. So it's so important just to do it, not to just say it and plan it. There was another picture, but I think maybe it's somewhere else. And the second Lodestar I like to use is low cost, and it's about not expending that much money. It's about it's risk investment. So when you take so much money into doing something, then the results that our funders, the government, the community are expecting are way bigger. So if we do it low cost, and then you'll see, then we can measure the impacts, and the impacts will be bigger if we do an analysis in financial terms. These donors love. Say, okay, they gave $1 and they're getting $10 back in impact. That's better than the opposite. Like they're spending $10, 10 years of doing something, and then at the end the project didn't work. The bridge, no one is using the bridge, right? So these are some of our parks we are doing in Tijuana. Tijuana is in the border with the U.S., with California. One of the most crazy areas if you want to visit. It's pretty much what the U.S. thing is all the world, right? It's Tijuana. So this is like the first door. But and we were speaking about gyms, about paint, about wood. So make it so simple, so fast, then that maybe the success will be measured later, or this one in another border city. That this is a last project we did in Ciudad Juarez. So it's basically paint, right? So it's not expensive. Then some tables and chairs, some shade. It took us a week to build this with a local organization. Right here, some of the pictures. And actually, I brought this one because we were working in Ray and I. We were working in Darabi slum. Monday, and also I told them we also did something in slums in Mexico have been formalized in the last 20 years, but there's still been some of them. So this is one of the last remaining ones without actually services. So it's basically going with the community, building their playground. It's so simple, and then they just throw a party for us. So this is basically what we are looking at. We are not looking about the wood, about the wheels. It's about the community. It's about building a place for people. And this takes no time. This really takes no time. Um, and the third is high impact. And of course, I've been listening all day also about having measurements and KPIs and about reporting back to our donors and our funders, and that's absolutely key. Like we need to understand that if we don't measure what we do, others and especially because we are all looking for funds to do stuff, if we don't present them in the language they can understand, it will be very hard for us to continue working. So that's pretty much our success, because we report back with numbers, they can understand our language. So yeah, so here's something we did with the public spaces for attributes, and then we relate them to the SDGs, and this work a lot to speak a common language with these UN habitat people. So, but the most important, and I'll finish like this my talk, is not about the numbers. It's about the real stories and the real people and the real change we are doing, because our ego of constructing will not be measured by numbers, but it will measure as how many people, how many hearts we touch, how many stories. So I was saying this in Spain some weeks ago. If we don't have a story to tell about our project, about our work, about someone we changed their life, even we have beautiful numbers, that's not placemaking. If there is no someone that was changed, touched, even for a moment, not for life, but for a small moment, then for me it's a red flag. So I'll say, do it fast as possible. Do it low cost, measure the impacts, and tell the stories about what we are doing. So thank you very much.
I think there was one thing which I really found amazing in your profile. There is a mention of 200 spaces that you all have actually been able to convert, right?
Yeah.
Which is quite a good number. And we don't even know the number in India. There are multiple people doing multiple placemaking projects, but we don't have a number. And to me, that was something that there is a number that you'll have been able to put down is a great start. But
yeah, I mean, we are now we are finishing 34, helping 34 communities. So for me, that's doing a public space, helping communities and doing something in their public space. That's creating, that's placemaking.
Yeah,
so yeah, so the question, what was the question?
what would we like to what would you like us to take away for Placemaking India? One anything. It could be any one small thing, but
Yeah, so I think you have fascinating stories. So maybe more storytelling. So tell about this woman, kid, child that has been touched by your work. That's so powerful. Like the branding I just saw from the taxi. I think that story. It went to the BBC because basically it's a related story about someone. So telling these stories, it's very useful to grow the network and to do your work.
In fact, recently in Bangalore, we had a conference where there were funders in the room. So Rohini Nilekani, I'm sure a lot of other people know Nilekani. They're philanthropists, right? And we are talking about the growing nature of Indian philanthropy in the Indian ecosystem, right? And the only thing she said, I need a story. I need a story to be inspired to put the money there. There is money, but I need that story. So totally correlates to it, yeah. Great,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Dirk, can we have you on stage? So I'm going to leave your introduction to you. Your introduction is really long, huh?
Oh, it's okay.
I got two different types of introduction.
Okay.
I'll leave it to you what you want to choose to say.
Okay, I will do. Dutch tulips. 2 minutes? 2 minutes, but I will not gonna sing. Maybe someone else? Take the mic.
Should we have the same thing?
Yeah. Okay, here we are. Sorry. What you have to touch to the next? Yeah, this one. Okay. Okay, good evening everyone. Mijn naam is Dirk de Jager. I'm from Amsterdam. And I used to be for a quite long period in politics in Amsterdam as a deputy mayor in 2 districts, responsible for public space, traffic, and also for urban planning. And in this period, I really became enthusiastic about cycling. I'm also a cycling expert, and that's one of the reasons also I'm traveling in India at the moment. But I'm also associated to STIPO, an organization in Amsterdam, who is very specialized in placemaking. So I'm now in the role of person related to STIPO, and what I would like to show you is one example in Amsterdam, which go far back already when it happened, when the word placemaking not yet existed, but in my opinion is a good example of placemaking. We see here some pictures, and the oldest pictures are from here, here, and here, and this is about 1920 in Amsterdam. And Amsterdam is in fact a relatively small city. I think some people of you I know have been there. We have only 800,000 inhabitants. Well, if I comparison with all the big, huge city in India here, it's a tiny city, but it's a lively city where a lot of things taking place. By that time, the shipbuilding was very big. We had a big wharf called the NDSM, the Dutch, I would explain, a very big Dutch company to docking and building ships. They were one of the biggest in the world, and they were also quite advanced in new technology. There was one of, I think, the most modern wharves in the world by 1950. It went very well. But then, at a certain moment, things changed in the world. We got this oil crisis, but there was also a lot of competition in the terms of the cost of labor, and a lot of those buildings went out to other places in the world. And in a quite short period, this whole building of ships was collapsed. And by that time, from that moment, and that was already somewhere somewhere between 1965 and 1980, I think in 76, the wharf was closed down, and an enormous, you can see it, it's a very big part at the waterfront in Amsterdam, in the river of the IJ, which split Amsterdam in 2 parts, in the north part and the other part of the city, this is the north part, became empty. And as you can see, it took a lot of time, I think about, a period, I think, of about 10 years, where nothing happened, 10, 15 years, nothing happened on that place. It was just an empty place where no activity and nothing happened. And then in the beginning of the 80s, we came in an economic crisis in the Netherlands. And also Amsterdam as a city was not so beautiful as it is by now. By that time, a lot of the houses were not good maintained. And the streets were not good maintained. It was dirty on the streets. And it could easily that you got some dog shit on your shoes if you would walk there. It was not nice. And we saw that a lot of people were leaving the city, going to the suburbs. They want to have a nice house with a garden, etc. And they didn't want to live anymore in a city as Amsterdam. It was a bad period for the city of Amsterdam by that time. And a lot of those houses, they became empty. And a new generation stand up in the beginning of the 80s, young people who did not accepted it, and they squatted these empty houses. They just occupied it, and they started to live there. And often it were communities who started there. And it was not only living in the house, it was really a culture. because there was no, by that time, the expectations or direction of the government were very low. The trust in the government was very low, and they say, well, if the government does nothing, we will do nothing, we will do it ourselves. They start workshops, created their own kitchens, created all kind of creative things. A lot of artists came in and started a lot of creative activities. And it was in that time that also in 1985, these old building parts were squatted because it was empty. So a lot of groups came in and artists came in and they took over the wharf and started with music, concerts. A lot of painters could make very high and big paintings. It was an enormous, a lot of creativity took place. It has a lot of value. Then in 2000, when there were some changes took place already in the meantime in the city, houses became better, public space became better, and there was also a new government, and they decided to take initiatives for the redevelopment of this huge area. It's the right button. Because this area, as you can see, the idea was also to develop a lot of housing. There was a lack of housing by that time, and it's a very nice area. And the idea was to build for the whole area houses everywhere. But there were a lot of people in the wharf, and a lot of people were active there. And so there was, in fact, it was taken already by the community, this place. And the government wanted actually to draw it down and to build houses. Well, then after some negotiations, the government said, okay, we will leave you for 10 years. For 10 years, you can stay there. We will do some reconstruction work on it a little bit so you can stay in it. But after 10 years, it had to be demolished for renovation for housing. And then something very important happened because it got a monumental status. Probably you will notice you have this in India and other countries as well. If you have a nice old building which has a certain value, cultural value, it can have a status that it cannot be demolished, that it should be protected. So it was a very important decision that was taking place, that all the old buildings, which has of course an heritage of wharf, and it were also very beautiful old industrial culture buildings, they were captured. And by that time, the government, the local government, had to do something, and they could not demolish the buildings. So then a complete other thing started. They said, okay, we create a competition for plans to create here something. And luckily, the squatters who were there, the group who were there, they won the competition. So they had the opportunity to do something. And then the local government invested about 15 million euros to make the old buildings better, so that it was saved against rain and wind, etc., and that you really could create things in there. And then the city remained as the owner of the whole area, so it was in fact saved in that time. But the squatters organized themselves in a foundation, and they thought from, okay, we want to be sure for the long term that we can keep this, and we can keep this in the area. There were 85 studios in the whole building with a lot of creative entrepreneurs. And then in 2015, this foundation were able to buy from the government the whole building. So the whole building is in the hands of this foundation of the 85 different cultural entrepreneurs. And what you see at the moment is that it's so an important place in the city of Amsterdam as a creative hub and creative place. And as we all know, we need this kind of places in the city. And this is not in a neighborhood, but this has a function for the city as a whole. And I can say even maybe beyond Amsterdam it has a function, because this is a place where a lot of new innovative ideas are starting. And it's a place where you can experiment and try out new things. on all kind of levels is taking place. It's one of the, in the meantime, I think one of the most important creative places who we have in Amsterdam, and I think also in the Netherlands. The costs are low, 350 euros a month, which is for Dutch perspectives. You have to, it's doable, it's affordable for also starting new artists to be there and to rent a place and to do their thing. The lesson from my point of view here is that there is a bottom-up movement, who really, they squatted it. They are not afraid. They take the ground, they take it, and they struggle and fighting to get it. And at the same time, at a certain moment, also the government understands this is important for our city, because this is value for our city to have this. And they understood this, and then they started negotiating. In the end of the day, it's captured for the city, and it's nice. So this is just an example how things can take place. An example which, of course, I can imagine within the Indian situation, it might be different. I don't know. But I can imagine there will be also places here abandoned and empty in cities. So it could be an opportunity to, just take it. I would say just go ahead and try to find your place and take your position in it. And that's also my point. I know which question you want to ask me. I saw this in this beautiful 3 days I'm here now, and it's this beautiful place, by the way. I met a lot of you, young, Indian, well-educated people. And you have a lot of potential. You have a lot of ideas. And I think that in placemaking, which is one important element in development of your country in the cities, it's very important. And we have a broad definition of what placemaking is. I think maybe this can inspire you to just not be too shy and take the ground and take the floor, take your position, because I think also the future of your country, the future of your cities is also in your hands. It's you can make the difference. That's what I want to say to you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And so now I'm going to open the floor to everyone here. Not to the speakers specifically, but to everyone around. Something that inspired you, something that you think from the 3 days that we've been here now, that we should all be thinking about. I mean, we've got embedding graphic design from the beginning, standardizing an Indian process for placemaking, more storytelling, not to be shy and reclaim your spaces. What else have we got? And I'll pass this on, but anyone? Just thoughts, we are under a beautiful tree.
There were a few things I wanted to talk, but I'll talk to you individually. But there's one thing I can say now is like now it's time that we stop asking questions and we start doing it, because it's been so long that we are always asking questions. This is not happening, that is not happening, this is not efficient, this is not sustainable. But instead of, keeping like, continuously asking why it is happening, instead of that, we can, take inspirations of all these projects as well, and be a little more creative and start doing. I think that's what we can at least decide from here, and we move forward. Yeah, thank you.
So a lot of what we've heard during these 2 days, it seems, I mean, I'm just taking the discussion forward from what you've said, is we seem to be fairly dependent on the regulatory processes or the government taking action. I would certainly like if we can also start exploring, and we've had some discussions on how do we work on our own, either to set up our own projects, maybe by squatting. I don't know. I am not too sure on that in this context. But otherwise, I mean, are there spaces that we could develop on our own? Alternatively, we work with the large developers that are now happening. Can we look at other forms of money coming in to be able to do these projects? PPPs as they're called. So some of those things we need to start looking at and start creating different models of starting work. I'm saying starting, and then maybe like here also the governments then come in and fall in place. Largely that I've seen is most places, whether it is Hoskas village, how many of you know in Delhi? It's become now the Shahpur Jat village happening. I'm talking about Udaipur, of course. I know a lot of work that is happening in Jodhpur. Some Mandawa we're looking at doing. So it's largely started off by the private sector. To expect government to have the vision at this point of time, I'm not too sure. I mean, there will be isolated examples like this one here, but in a process-driven system, we should be a little more, not dependent on that, less dependent on that. Yeah. So individuals in the government manage to do things, which is what I'm saying. Yeah. But I would certainly, like to explore some of these things, like we were just talking about just now. And I believe you may have done the Red Fort. Okay, there was the Red Fort. Yeah. So we did some work with the Red Fort. Whenever any of you are in Delhi, go and see Red Fort. From what it used to be a shitty thing, to it's now a world-class set of museums, restaurants, the way it's planned out. And so there was a lot of opposition to that. There was a lot of bad press that Modi sold Red Fort. And I remember going before it. I have 2 daughters. So there were no toilets there, and for shitty restaurants which was giving you bad stuff at expensive prices, to a great world-class place. So yeah. So as citizens, I think we need to start doing things a lot more on our own than expecting the governments to drive change. Yeah. But then that's how you influence policies. That's how you influence politics. Yeah.
So actually continuing the discussion of doing things on our own, I think this is a wonderful opportunity since all of us are here. Often in our practice, we realize that India, somehow, whenever we start a project, there's always this data collection that we get irritated with, quite frankly, because either the data is not available or it's not legible or it's not in the form that we want. So I think together we might not be able to work on projects as such, but we can start by sharing data or collecting data. And I think placemaking is such a beautiful concept that even photographs is a big deal. Telling stories is a big deal. So I think this is a wonderful platform to sort of start doing that more, process and a system. And I think we can make a repository out of it. Yeah.
I think couple of things. One is that in our experience, actually, like, being is a criminal in the public space. Like, your existence in India and most of the places, like, is a criminal act. Like, it's your fault most of the time that you have died on the road. Right? You can't cross the road not because the systems don't exist, it's because you chose to run across a highway that was made in the middle of a damn neighborhood. And I think this is a very deeply cultural and maybe non-diplomatic sort of thing to say, but we have faced enough circumstances of this where actively there is a suppression of not listening to people who are here, and actively negating that and imposing sort of one person's thought or 2 people's thought because the ego-driven thing of them wanting to achieve something. I think there is a fundamental lack of breakdown of representation in what we call a democratic society. And so if we have to do placemaking better, then it's the listening that has to become better. It's representation that has to become better. and authorship of self-driven stories has to become better. There is no authorship. Data is being taken, and I think we brought this a couple of times, right? It's not being represented back, and it's constant, especially if you go to low-income communities and people working there, you're just like 50 times there are 50 organizations that have gone to collect data, but like no one has asked them, no one has done anything. And I was part of a very, very, very big funding organizations which spent millions in universities to study public toilets in Ahmedabad, but didn't even bother to build a toilet there actually. So I think this idea of listening better, representing, and the authorship somehow remaining there and really empowering people to have that authorship there. I don't know how that happens, but if you're talking about placemaking, then it has to happen there, so that the stories are theirs and they're not stolen from them, and from us actually.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that maybe having intergenerational conversations, like from children to grandfather, so that their memories also become part of our landscape and our memory, because I have not lived their memory. So I think erasing memory also erases a lot of identity of the place. And I think I was having conversations with a lot of these people here, and going home after Placemaking India Week, maybe we should also take some inspiration from Placemaking Mexico and Placemaking Europe, who have come as a collective of people with a real vision like us, and sort of extended that conversation and all these conferences into actionable outcomes. I think we have the wherewithal and we have the, push to go forward and do that. Maybe select some projects in different cities and try to do it as a team. And Placemaking India can really drive such a thing. Why even look for a collective beyond what we have here? We can bring in more multidisciplinary people. We have a branding. We even have Placemaking Malaysia. We can take inspiration from. So I think a lot of what we have seen over these couple of days is something that can lend itself well into what the future of Placemaking India Week itself can become. Maybe 2 years from now, the next Placemaking Week, we inaugurate a place that has already been done by all of us, and we celebrate there. Could be something like that. So yeah, I think that's where I want to end. Anybody else?
Always play smart against that. No, yeah. No, I think as much as each one of us, fundamentally the way I understand placemaking is that each one of us have our own jobs to just get a bread and butter on a daily basis, but then this has purely come out of our interest to be a part of a larger collective, right? And the second thing being that it's not just so-called architects and urban planners and urban designers. There is a wider spectrum which is very consciously put forth now, that we have to look into much neutral ground than getting into this thing. So the way I see this is, just work on that individual basis firstly. Although we have our expertise to work across different things, but I think we should just start from us being like humans and users on space, think what people really need, because nobody is expecting something for us to deliver for a donor or a city government here, but the goal is to start pure, to see how each one of us bring in that kind of contribution to this can collectively come together and do something meaningful to start with, not really worry about where are we going to get the funds, how will we implement this, but firstly just start with a pure story in terms of what is happening in cities and what is that we can really contribute. This could be both in terms of one, which I very strongly feel is with respect to all the presentations done there, different organizations working different, just as simple as internally, can we find a simpler way to either document that and build a conversation where we just share those simple steps rather than repeating that, so that if Malaysia has done something, can you just extract a process out of that, have certain sessions, conversations in a way that we just have a repository of different things as a palette. Then we say, if I need this, I can pick 1, 2, 3 and try to see if it fits into then add our flavor to the whole thing. And second thing is, of course, pushing ourselves onto the ground, but not really with an intent of, continuously trying to implement something per se, but have a story to that, like how we were saying in the Mexico presentation, because we need to understand local context and people and bring that narrative together. If we do these two things, I think then we can sort of take a step back and connect back to our respective professions, organization, then see how we can pull in funds or have a collaboration between two organizations to work together. But I think what is strongly, I feel the strength of Placemaking India is we are starting as individuals to see how can I contribute something to the city and the society. So that I think we shouldn't lose as an essence, and not really force ourselves to say that we have to show an outcome to someone. We'd rather start. Yeah. Yeah. Even, yeah, collate that information. Yeah. But I'm not saying collating in the sense that, again, we have like 50 projects lined up in a presentation, but extract a process out of it and then see what can we take from that.
Anyone else? Everyone's hungry, is it?
So yeah, I think this idea of we were talking earlier, and a lot of parallel conversations happening here as well, which is a great sign. We were talking about, so the two things. One is this idea of making this a way of life. I know it seems a little big picture, but everybody in this room seems to have this innate need to do something more than what the brief is, right? And that's really great. And I wonder if when we get projects which are outside of the brief that were given to us, and I think that's a lot of examples here. Urmi did spoke about that as well, that they were just asked to make a wall, and then you go beyond it. So it's about us having that agenda, and it's okay to have an agenda. And it's okay to convince people, because it is our job to educate. Yes, it's tiring, and it takes that one more conversation, asking for more time, more funds. But that one extra step goes 1000x. And that's been my experience with local, right? We are ultimately a graphic design brand studio. And I don't see why other brand studios don't do if there should be an ulterior motive, apart from just getting paid and, just there has to be soul in the work, right? And I think that's one big thing from placemaking that I feel that I've learned. And second, this idea of what progress means, right, to all of us. And I think Natasha was asking this amazing question. We had this great conversation, but I think all of us aligning on that, where are we pushing India towards? What is going on? Okay, maybe the government has confused ideas, but what do we have as a Placemaking India community? How do we see this as a common? What are are there any commonalities, or is there and maybe Natasha, you can do this survey with this group of people. You were saying you wanted to do that. Yeah, so I think it really, it's about common direction. We want to push it to, what is the big picture? We are across states, across geographies, here.
Anyone else? Are we good to break for dinner? Yeah? Oh, we've got music. Okay, great. I just so I just, before we sort of wrap up, I want to thank all the 4 speakers. I want to thank all of you all for actually thinking at this time of the night. Yeah, great session. Thank you, guys. I'm sharing a Google form on the WhatsApp group.
You want to speak something? No. So guys, we're going to dance now. Game. So these guys are going to play some music. We're going to dance to them. But before that, the way they used to communicate with their Ganeshana, ನೀವು ಅದು ಹೇಗೆ ಅದನ್ನು ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರಿ ಆ ತಟ್ಟೆಗಳದ್ದು ಒಂದು 5 ನಿಮಿಷದ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟೇಷನ್ ಮಾಡೋಣ, ಮತ್ತೊಂದು ಮಾಡಿಬಿಟ್ಟು ನಮಗೆ ಕುಡಿತಾರಂತೆ. ಬಲ್ಲೆ.
ಬಂಧುಗಳೇ, ಉಡುಪಿ ಜಿಲ್ಲೆಯ ಮೂಲ ನಿವಾಸಿಗಳು ನಾವು ಕೊರಗ ಸಮುದಾಯದವರು. PVTGಯಲ್ಲಿ ಬರ್ತದೆ, ಪ್ರಿಮಿಟಿವ್ ಟ್ರೈಬ್ ಆಗಿ ಇರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ನಾವು. ಇದು ನಮ್ಮ ಸಂಸ್ಕೃತಿ, ಕಲೆ. ಇದನ್ನು ಇಲ್ಲಿಯ ಜನ ಕಲೆ ಅಂತ ಸ್ವೀಕರಿಸುವುದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಅದನ್ನು ಒಂದು ಅಸ್ಪೃಶ್ಯತಾ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದಲೇ ಕಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಸರಿಯಾದ ಗೌರವವನ್ನು ಸಿಗಲಿಲ್ಲ.
He says that I am from this community which is the aboriginal community of this land. This is our culture, but in the mainstream culture we have never been included. We have been always kept aside, and they don't call this as our culture. When I say this is the culture of the land, they don't include this as their culture. They always have kept us aside because we were the untouchables.
ಆದರೂ ನಾವು ಈ ಕಲೆಯನ್ನು ಬಿಡಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಇದು ಯಾಕೆಂದರೆ ರಕ್ತಗತವಾಗಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಹಿರಿಯರಿಂದ ಬಂದಂಥ ಒಂದು ಕಲೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಇದನ್ನು ಬಿಡಬಾರ್ದು ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ ಇದನ್ನು ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ಇದನ್ನು ಬೇರೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಜನ ಒಟ್ಟು ಇವರು ಬಾರಿಸ್ತಾರೆ, ನುಡಿಸ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದನ್ನು ಮಾತ್ರ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಬಟ್ ಹಾಗಲ್ಲ. ಇದು ಯಾವ್ಯಾವ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಗೆ ಬಾರಿಸಬೇಕು ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದಿದೆ. ಯಾವ್ಯಾವ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ ತಕ್ಕನ್ನು ನುಡಿಸ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಿದೆ. ಅದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು 5 ತಕ್ಕನ್ನು ನುಡಿಸ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಪಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ.
He says it's not just playing the instrument. This is coded. There's a lot of cultural coding attached to it. There is contextual connection to the rhythm which they'll be playing. So he's just going to demonstrate 5 such examples of how a culture which he told us that he has fought against all odds, and just keeping this would have been extinct otherwise, because the new generation are getting educated. They don't try to own. So like Sudarshan is an MBA graduate, but he has left behind that, and he's playing this as a full-time professional, and they're trying to revive this culture. Barkur Ganeshana is an auto rickshaw driver by profession, and he is a very big expert in digging wells. The tragedy is that he can locate water, but in the same well, because he comes from a scheduled tribe, he can't drink water in the community. That's the reality of this country. But now things have changed. A little bit. ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ adjust ಮಾಡಿ, like, you know. So
ಈಗ ಇವರು ನುಡಿಸ್ತಾರೆ, ಇದು ನಾವು ದೈವಸ್ಥಾನದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತ್ರ ಈ ತಕ್ಕನ್ನು ನುಡಿಸ್ತೇವೆ. ಇದನ್ನು ಬೇರೆ ಎಲ್ಲೂ ನುಡಿಸೋದಿಲ್ಲ.
So he's going to play a rhythm now, which is only dedicated to the space where the Teyam happens, the Kola. We call it the Daivasthana. It's not the god. It's not Deva. It's not the Vedic gods. It's a rural communal, the community, the god of the community.
ದೈವಸ್ಥಾನದಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಥರದಲ್ಲಿ ನುಡಿಸಿದರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಮದುವೆಯ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ, ನಮ್ಮ ಮನೆಯ ಮದುವೆಯ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವೊಂದು ತಕ್ಕನ್ನು ನುಡಿಸ್ತೇವೆ. ಮದುವೆಯ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವುದನ್ನು ನುಡಿಸ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತೇಳಿ ತೋರಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ.
uh, I just want to add to what he is saying. In the Daivasthana, when they're playing the dolu, even there is indiscrimination. They don't play with the main players, the main music ensemble which plays for the Daiva. That's a kind of oracle worship when they invite the spirits with their body and they dance. But there is also an indiscrimination because they're the lowest of the low. So they are supposed to, if the Daivasthana they're playing here, they are supposed to a bit outside. They're not included in the main frame. And then now he's going to show in there what they play, the kind of the rhythm for their marriage. So all this sound has a story behind it. But it's too short a time to explain that, but he's just going to show this small rhythm for which he's going to play for the marriage.
ಮದುವೆಯ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ರೀತಿ ನುಡಿಸಿದರೆ ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಹೆಣ್ಣು ಮಗು ಹುಟ್ಟಿದಾಗ ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ಸಂಭ್ರಮ ಪಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಆ ಮಗುವಿನ ನಾಮಕರಣ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹೊಡಿತಾರೆ. ಅದು ಆ ಮಗುವಿನ ಹೆಣ್ಣು ಮಗು ಹುಟ್ಟಿದಾಗಲೇ ಮಾತ್ರ ಆ ಥರದಲ್ಲಿ ನುಡಿಸ್ತಾರೆ ಮತ್ತು ಖುಷಿ ಪಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಸೊ ನಾವು ಹೆಣ್ಣು ಮಗು ಹುಟ್ಟಿದರೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಖುಷಿ ಪಡುವುದು.
It's very unique when they celebrate a birth of a girl child. It's the most prestigious thing when for them in their community that a girl is born and then they have a lot of
happy
with a lot of happiness and merry they play this band, this rhythm pattern. It's coded for the birth of the girl child.
ನಮ್ಮ ಈ ಕಲೆಯನ್ನು ಇಲ್ಲಿಯ ಜನ ಗೌರವಿಸಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಅವರು ಅವರ ಸ್ವಾರ್ಥಕ್ಕೆ ಹೇಗೆ ಬಳಸ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು ಒಂದು ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ತೋರಿಸ್ತೇವೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹಳ ಹಿಂದೆ ಶ್ರೀಮಂತರ ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ, ಅಂದರೆ ಆ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಶೆಟ್ರ ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ, ದೊಡ್ಡ ಇವ್ರ ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರಾದರೂ ಸತ್ತೋದ್ರೆ, ತೀರ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಡೋಲನ್ನು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬಾರಿಸ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿತ್ತು. ನಾವು ಅದು ಹೆಣ ತೆಗೆಯುವ ತನಕ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಂತು ಬಾರಿಸ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿತ್ತು. ನಾವು ಬಾರಿಸುವ ಆ ತಕ್ಕಿದೆ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಆ ರಿದಮ್ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಅದರಿಂದಲೇ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಯಾರೋ ಡೆತ್ ಆಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ, ದೊಡ್ಡವರು ಯಾರೋ ಡೆತ್ ಆಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ. ಆ ಒಂದು ತಕ್ಕನ್ನು ಈಗ ನಾವು ಮಾಡೋದಿಲ್ಲ, ಅದನ್ನು ಎಲ್ಲಿಯೂ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ನಾವು. ಅದು ಸರಿಯಲ್ಲ, ಅನಿಷ್ಟ ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಉದ್ದೇಶಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವೀಗ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಮೊದಲು ಆ ತಕ್ಕನ್ನು ನುಡಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೆವು. ಅದು ಹೇಗಿದೆ ಅಂತ ತೋರಿಸ್ತಾರೆ.
The humiliation as a community which they have felt, very affluent landlord feudal families, when some death used to happen, they were very mercilessly asking them to play from the time of the death till the body is, so they found it until we kind of bury the body. So till then they were supposed to play. It was very inhuman practice. Now they stopped doing it. But just for your sake, they're going to play that thing. So it's like the talking drum. So every rhythm and every performance has a code. So he's going to play it.
ಇದು ಡೆತ್ ಆಗಿ ಬಾಡಿ ಇದು ಮಾಡೋ ತನಕ ಅವರ ಅಂತ್ಯಕ್ರಿಯೆ ಪೂರ್ತಿ ಆಗೋ ತನಕ ರಾತ್ರಿ ಹಗಲಂದೇ ಹೊಡಿತಾ ನಿಲ್ಲಬೇಕು ನಾವು. ಆ ಥರದಲ್ಲಿ ಇತ್ತು. ಅದು ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಈಗ ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಅದನ್ನು ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಈಗ ನಾವು ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಖುಷಿ ಪಟ್ಟಾಗ ಒಂದು ಕುಣಿತೇವೆ ನಾವು. ಆಗ ಖುಷಿ ಆಗ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಹೊಡಿತಾ ಇರ್ತೇವೆ. ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಅಂತ ತೋರಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ.
Okay, essentially they play this when they are happy and in the celebratory mode. So.
Nobody's dancing. No one wants to dance. No one do it here. Come on. That's it. That's the spirit. Come on, guys. We're going to wind up now. Food is waiting. That's it. We've got a party. We're going to go back home.